Good evening, educators and speakers. I would like to make sure that everyone is already in the room. Okay, without further ado, let's begin this debate. Good evening and welcome to welcome to the second preliminary round of OIM FTUI's debate competition. My name is Andrew Bernhardt and I will be the chairman for this round, and An Aziz will be the timekeeper for this round. As for this round of the debate, the motion is this House, as a developed country, would only give aid to developing countries who implement environmentally friendly policies. From the government team, we have Departemen Teknik Mesin with Mr. Christopher Erwin as the first speaker, Mr. Miguel Bintang Samuel as the second speaker, Mr. Divan Kamal Akbar as the third speaker, and lastly, Mr. Christopher Erwin as the reply speaker. As from the opposition team, we have team Departemen Teknik Sipil with Mr. Nathaniel Isaiah as the first speaker, Mr. Michael Harry as the second speaker, Mrs. Nisya Orhian Hassan as the third speaker, and finally, Mr. Nathaniel Isaiah as the reply speaker. As for the first speaker from the government team, I would like to welcome Mr. Christopher Erwin to begin his speech. Time is all yours.
Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry, give me a moment. If anyone wants to POI, feel free to try to interrupt. And if anything wrong happens with my connection, feel free to interrupt also. I will now start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Dear Judge, as government, we support developed countries to only give aid to developing countries who implement environmentally friendly policies. This development can come in the form of funding and finances by public actors or government institutions from well-off countries, providing loans and subsidies for programs that are environmentally focused within these developing countries. And this aid can also come in the form of technical assistance and, sorry, is the timer off? This and technical assistance in the form of planning and human resources and the proliferation of knowledge. What are these environmentally friendly policies that we wish to support, and what does it look like? I will explain it in my following point. So first of all, let's see why we want to push forward this policy. A lot of institutions and banks are reluctant to fund climate projects locally in such developing countries. This is likely due to the lack of interest and the lack of development. Oftentimes, this funding would rather easily go to the easier option or through selfish interests, which shortcut the consideration of environmental aspects in order to simply get things done for the sake of quick development. Because let's face it, local investors from a developed country are unlikely to be A, wholly educated in the implications of considering environmental factors in their policies, and B, less willing to be giving their money to something that hasn't gained much traction and foundation in their local community. We say that in developed countries, there is an interest from local startups and local communities to innovate and propose policies with an environmentally friendly focus. However, these proposals often lose out funding and are vulnerable to losing the interests of investors, despite the fact that they are far more beneficial on the greater picture. Our proposal seeks to push local financial institutions towards funding and investing in environmentally friendly projects, such as policies which transform the transport, energy, agriculture, finance, and industrial sectors to bring them in line with the policies, standards, and regulations of climate challenge. Now, we wish to do this because doing so is an expensive process, and funding is often very difficult to find because investors consider such projects to be risky, or the country in question is simply not favored by financial markets simply for being a developed third world country. We want these countries to be able to develop low carbon emission policies, energy efficient infrastructure, eco-agricultural farming methods, and allow them to have easier transition towards things such as widespread solar panel installation. We believe our policy will benefit these developing countries economically, because it will create new jobs, it will point businesses towards new markets and diversify sources of income for the said country's local economy. And this then will have a snowball effect impact on education, healthcare, and access to essential services. In my speech and in our government's case, we will prove that shifting the economic interests of local investors in developing countries is far better for the future progress in infrastructure, education, and economy of the developing country, and that giving aid on the basis of environmental interest will ensure long-term sustainability. I will go forward to my first point. Without environmentally focused development aid, some countries would not be able to fund their ecological transition. As we know, most countries have signed and ratified internationally agreed policies on reaching a certain environmental goal, such as the carbon emission or the Paris Agreement, for example. Without giving this funding, it would be nigh impossible for them to transform their industry, their infrastructure, because it is an expensive process. Now, these are all obstacles that our aid can help to overcome by granting funding to the actors in the ecological transition at an affordable price through subsidies, when it is not simply a question of donations, dear speaker, because it is that urgent that is necessary for NGOs and governmental bodies from developed countries to focus their aid to shift towards aiding this ecological transition. Many developing countries are literally struggling to adapt to the effects of climate change, such as Mauritius, which is literally sinking into the ocean, and many equatorial countries suffering from climate change in the form of hurricanes and typhoons damaging their infrastructures, causing loss in billions of dollars. Dealing with those things on top of social issues is very challenging for these countries that are still learning to catch up to the global economic state. And that is why it's not only urgent, but it's also in the interest of the developing countries to be willing to go with focusing their policies towards environmentally friendly policies. Second of all, our model will create more jobs. We help adapt societies to reduce their impact on the climate, which cannot be done without appropriate investment in the context of developing countries. On top of that, it provides excellent economic and social opportunities, creating jobs and pointing businesses to new markets and diversifying sources of income. For example, by allowing policies that create new renewable energy stations, recycling facilities, and creating professions such as environmentally friendly city planners, we provide not only the infrastructure and funding, but also the possibility of education and the innovation of technology and knowledge. Through our policy, many of the people will become, there will be new jobs such as solar panel technicians and educations and professions related with technological innovations related with eco-centric policies. And that is why, for the betterment of the developing country, please vote for government. Thank you.
Right, that concludes the first speech from the first speaker of the government side. Now I would like to welcome the first speaker from the opposition side, Mr. Nathaniel Isaiah. Time is all yours.
All right, good evening. I'm here as the first speaker from the opposition. First of all, I'd like to give context about why a country should give aid. A developed country's main interest in giving aid is to make sure that the developing country could be in a better place and become a potential partner for them in the future. Thus, the idea of sustainability is important for their future partners. However, we disagree about giving aid to developing countries that implement environmentally friendly policies because we believe that it is not a good parameter. And why is that? First of all, the developed countries that implement these environmentally friendly policies, they tend to have very complicated policies and difficult mechanisms in trade. And which is why if a developed country intends to become partners with these developing countries in the future, trades will be very difficult. And I'd like to also bring to the fact that it is very difficult, and we are fairly skeptic about how much they will implement these environmentally friendly policies, because we cannot prove that they will be bringing these environmentally friendly policies if we give them aid. We cannot even. No, thank you. And then by just giving these fundings without any thought, well, us as the developed country will be losing our resources, our money, without any benefits. And we also believe that why are you so sure that the environmentally friendly country is the only one that can be used as a business partner when we believe that there are many other alternatives and parameters that can be used to ensure a good partnership in the future? And I believe the first speaker also said that the reason that that environmentally friendly policies are having low interest generally is because, well, they are environmentally friendly policies, and we disagree to that because there are many factors which diminish the interest of investors in a country. And by saying that these countries that try to develop environmentally friendly policies don't have interest could give an implication that there is a deeper problem that is not environmentally friendly policies that can be used as the other countries and investors uh, point of consideration to not give aid. And then you also said about expensive, risky, and harder transition, which we believe would be a point to not give aid to them because it is a very bad investment. As I have said before, that an aid is an investment, and these investments needs to make a return, or we will basically
TOI?
lose. No, thank you. And then maybe I'd like to give a few examples on why environmentally friendly policies are not a good parameter to judge a country to whether give aid or not. And a very good example is the fact that Malaysia is a much more enticing point of investment from investors because rather than Indonesia, not because Malaysia has a better environmentally friendly policies, but because they have a better system, you can argue, a better policies for business and other things. So yeah, and then we also believe that the term environmentally friendly policies implementing developing countries it's very vague, because how can we measure these environmentally friendly policies that they have implemented? Because we know for a fact that environmentally friendly policies are expensive and they are very hard to implement. And we can see in our current status quo that the environmentally friendly policy countries are not developing countries, but developed countries, which is the one giving aid. However, by saying this, we say that in that end, making a developing countries that implement environmentally friendly policies as a parameter to give aid is very counterproductive, because we cannot make it as a point to consider to make an investment for these developing countries. Because as I have said in the beginning, in giving aid needs to have a purpose, and that purpose is to then make a business partner in the future with these developing countries. And with these very vague parameters of implementing environmentally friendly policies from these countries, we believe that we cannot make a surefire way of returning that investment from these countries. And I believe that this is our main argument. Thank you.
That concludes the speech from the first speaker of the opposition side. Now I'd like to call upon the second speaker from the government side. Please welcome Mr. Miguel Bintang Samuel. Time is all yours.
For my policy of POI, you just can say POI straight. I will start my speech in 1, 2, 3. Mr. Chairman, can you see that the opposition side is really selfish as a developed countries? We see they only want to give aid to dying developing countries if it only gives them profit. Wait, isn't that not the meaning of aid? Aid is helping the people that cannot help themselves. That is aid. This is investment. It's a different thing. You are really selfish. Consider profit in giving aid. That is really selfish, Mr. Chairman. And the other thing is, developed countries already take resources and money from these countries. Their long gone age of colonialism, for example, Britain, Germany, and Belgium in Africa, for example, isn't that taking their resources? Why are you still crying for resources, even though you take them an age before? And the other thing is, why the op giving an argument from in the example of Malaysia. Malaysia is a rich country. Why are you giving aid to a rich country? The first speaker of the opposition said that Malaysia have a good infrastructure and a good system. Isn't that the characteristic of a well-off countries? That is really, really questionable, Mr. Chairman. Now that the other thing that the government side brings a lot is parameters. This is really, really questionable also. Isn't we already have Paris Agreement? Isn't that just a bunch of people doesn't know what the parameter of sustainability? So why have a Paris Agreement then? So we can see already that there is a parameter for environmental sustainability. So that is not a question in this debate. For if you imply there is none, I will bring one example, just an easy example: CO2 level. That is an easy example. So that is really, really not commable in this debate. So after I finish all of that, I will bring my first point. My first point is that this policy is, as I said before, is principally justified as a duty for developed countries, for helping developing countries, that they use their resources and they colonialize in the age before. Why I say this? Because this is not only their duty, it is only important part of their survival. As you can see that climate change is a really critical part of Earth sustainability. So developed countries must help decrease the popping of another developed countries that produce a lot of pollution. And I will bring the principle of what step does developing countries do to become a developed countries, Mr. Chairman. So there is 5 steps: the traditional society, the precondition of takeoff, the takeoff, drive to maturity, and age of high mass consumption. So if they doesn't consider this sustainability and the environment, we skip the drive of maturity of the developing countries. This is really, really critical, because this is a really critical point, and it takes a long time. Sure, it's a long time, but it's ensure the sustainability of Earth and everybody in this Earth. So what I mean by drive of maturity, it means that after the takeoff, which is the industrialization of developing countries, drive to maturity is age of research and searching for a way to make their manufacturing more safe for the environment and more effective. So if we just give them willy-nilly aid, this is really dangerous, because these developing countries just can industrialize in a fast rate without caring about the environment, which is really, really bad for the environment, as I said. So this just produce more pollution pollution producers, Mr. Chairman. So what is my evidence? So my first evidence is the countries in Africa itself. So for example, Nigeria. I will take Nigeria because Nigeria is a former colony of Britain, and Britain has given aid in high, like a lot of aid, without considering their commitment to stability. And look at them now; they are in the progress of becoming a middle-class country, with a mortality, birth mortality rate of 1 in 10, because their one of their cities, Onitsha, in Nigeria, is the most polluted country, city in the world. So as you can see, we have a proper impact. We can see now that this is really dangerous if we continue to do this to the future. And the other point that I am giving for regarding the impact for the future of this giving this policy is giving aid based on commitment will ensure as my first speaker said, economics. Why I focus on economics? Because economics really is the fundamentals of every part of a country. For example, education. You cannot have good education without economics. Why you can imply that? You ask because because that, as you can see, with the Nigeria case before that, bad pollution caused more death. As you can see, that this shows that the country must spend not only on cleanups in polluted rivers, in polluted bodies of water, in polluted forests and everything, but also a safe medical and good medical budget. So this only if we give aid not based on environmental commitment, it will only create a circle of unending suffering, because you just keep asking for money and you keep asking for money without actually solving the problem. It's only because the country will always suffer because of this pollution. So therefore, having this policy is really, really better for a long term, and not only for developing countries, but for the sake of the developed countries' survival itself also. So please, Mr. Chairman, imply this policy. Thank you.
Right, that concludes the second speech from the government side. Now let us welcome Mr. Michael Harry as the second speaker from the opposition side. Time is all yours.
Okay, so before I start, let me introduce myself again. My name is Michael, and I'm from the opposition team of the motion of that you only support developing country with environmental friendly policies. Okay, the first thing that I want to point out is that from the argument is that the first thing first, environmental friendly policies for a developed country is not a good parameter to pick a country which you're going to aid with, because there are so many problems in developing countries in implementing the part of environmental friendly policies. Secondly, of our argument is that the environmental friendly policies have a complicated mechanism of business and works that tends to have a difficult benefits mechanism. So it's really difficult for the developing countries to develop economic friendly policies. The third one, because the developing countries tends to have a difficulties on implementing it. They have a lot of burden for developing. It's a lot of burden for developing country to implement the environmental friendly policies, and that's why there are not many developed countries as successfully implemented it. Let's just go back to the what's definition of a developing country itself. If a developed country successfully implement the environmental friendly policies, then that country cannot be considered as a developing country anymore. That's just I want to clarify first. And there are so many arguments that contradicts with what you were saying. You're saying you're focusing on economy, but the real problem is that the economy are having difficult when you implement the environmental friendly policies. And I want to clarify what the second speaker says about what argument that coming from our first speaker, that you say that we are selfish. But the truth behind of argument is that we are not saying that we only support the country that benefit us. But what we are truly saying is that there are another country that need aids more, rather than that it's more, but that country isn't environmentally friendly policy yet. So how do you want to implement so how does a country can implement environmentally friendly policies when they have a difficult economies on themselves? That's why I'm pointing that there are so many developing countries that are having difficult in implementing environmentally friendly policies.
Excuse me, sir. POI?
No,
Yes or no?
decline. There are many things that why I consider that you should not use environmental friendly policies as a good parameter to help countries, because basically there are so many countries globally the developing countries are not yet be able to use an environmental friendly policies, and the quantity of the country that have implemented it is very much low, and that's that is why if you're saying you're going to aid a developing country, then the developing country needs to implement the environmental friendly principles. But why you are going to implement? But why and how can you implement environmentally friendly policies when you cannot develop a good economy from yourself? I could take example as from people in Indonesia of okay, Indonesia is trying to implement the EBT and stuff like that to be and become triangle friendly policies, but the people in and in selected places as like a farmers and that they still having difficulties on implementing the environmental friendly policies. This I say using EBT, and instead they're using the the fossil fuel because that is the most affordable and easy to use. That is why I'm telling you, a developing country is really at a difficult place to implement environmental friendly policies. And there are also a few points that I think what we are saying is not. I think there are a few points that you guys are missing because the first I want to remind you that uh, we're not saying that uh, that developing that only developing only environmental only developing countries that don't implement the environmental policies are needed of help, because the truth to be told that the countries that the developing countries that trying to implement the environmentally friendly policies is tend to having a difficulty on implementing. That's why that's our main only reason why you should reconsider using environmental friendly policies as your main parameter to pick a country that you want to give aid with. And I want to uh, talk a bit about why I'm saying that that it is really difficult to implement the environmental friendly policies in developing countries. As we could see that actually the business and the investment investors people are really having difficult to doing a cooperation with a country that having a that having that implement the environmental friendly policies, and through that reason it causes that the country difficult to develop. So that is why if you're saying that the country needs to develop an environmental friendly policies, that's not the real question. The real question is uh, the real question is that can they do that? Because implementing an environmental friendly policies is the next level of becoming from developing countries into an
Excuse me,
advanced country.
sir.
That's why I want to implement to say more that okay, you can talk about environment to how to sustain the environment and stuff and others like that. But let's just see at the fact of how they can sustain the environment when they are having difficult when they're with their own economies. That is why I want to reconfirm again that we're not saying we only support the country that benefit, but we need to support country others developing countries that implement the environmental friendly policies. And that's all the point that I want to say, to reconfirm again and restate what they are trying to say by only, but what we are want to say about this. But you need to rethink about the parameter of using environmental friendly policies countries to aid. But there are also a lot of countries that could benefit you, but they don't implement any environmental policies, and that's so they're still gonna be stuck on that circle, that cycle. So yeah, that's all that I want to say, and thank you very much for the time, and thank you for the listening.
That concludes the second speech from the opposition side. Now I'd like to call upon the third speaker from the government side, Mr. Devan Kemal Akbar. Time is all yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, and could you turn on your camera?
I'm afraid that could be lagging. I think it's could be a problem. Is that okay?
I think it's best that we try with your camera on first, and as soon as the lagging occurs, then we will inform you instantly. Thank you.
Okay. My speech will start in 1, 2, 3. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency. I'm here going to rebuttal the main foundation, the main argument on what they believe that the setting, giving an aid as developed country, giving an aid to developing countries who only implements environmental policies is not the good parameter. So they believe, they argue that what our proposal, what we have been saying, what we have been argued is not the best parameter, right? But here's the thing. The opposition side of the House, they did not give you any elaboration at all about what is the alternative parameters, right? And even if they give, yes, they give, even if they give like, okay, for example, we want to give them that does not hold, proper environmentally friendly policy countries, right? They give a very like elaboration on the impact that their proposal are having, right? For example, they give you this explanation about giving aid to a comparison about Malaysia, Indonesia, right? The policy, right? But they're lacking the argument to support their foundation thought, right? They're lacking this elaboration on their impact on what is the impact that if we give this country, the one that they portray as the country that is facing facing hardship to implement this environmental policy in the begin with. It's not the interest of the country to implement environmental policy. And what happens to the aid if we give, if as a developed countries, if we give them this aid, right? So one thing for sure, I want to portray first what is the most fundamental concepts of a country, right? So if this country does not support environmental policy regulations or environmental policy standards, right? Then their agenda is not on that. They should not be focusing on environmental at all, right? They should be prioritizing their own national interests based on their problems, right? For example, corruption, maybe, I don't know, maybe corruption, maybe economical problems, who knows, maybe immigration, maybe other things that are more basic, like providing, how to ensure that the government is providing food for the people, right? So that's the questions. That is why that is basically the fundamental principles of the government side of the House. This is why we want to give aid to the country that only that is in their interest, right? To begin with, that is why we want to give this aid to the country who are actually have the same interest as us, who actually have their agendas aligned, that they know that they are capable of, managing those funds, managing the aids coming from the developed countries, right? Either it is NGO, technical assistance, or capacity buildings, right? That's why we trust them. If we know that, and they know that their priority is the environment to begin with, right? So that's basically their whole fundamental principles, their whole argument from the first speaker and the second is demolished, absolutely demolished to the ground, no more foundation whatsoever, right? So that is their absolute principle, right? The second mistakes coming from the opposition side of the House, right? They keep on questioning us, like how they keep on questioning us about these little things, like these insignificant little things about our argument on the impacts that we already give, right? The impacts, for example, our first speaker mentioned that this could help mentally focused development. Development could help the mental of these developing countries, and it could influence other developing countries who have not yet to do so, right? But they failed to get our idea of what do we actually mean? Like, for example, there is another point that is coming from the first speaker, right? We also argue that by giving aids to these countries, to the developing countries that is aligned, that have the same interest, that their environmentally policy is already aligned, like we could create better jobs, we could open bigger opportunities, like making technical assistance, building capacity building, making new company, for example, renewable resources, or doing some development aid, right? It could create a bigger job, an open opportunity, and it will boost the most basic needs for the people that is living in the developing countries, right? But what the opposite side of the House fails to understand is that they keep questioning how can we they keep questioning, right? Why is it in the interest of the developed country to give this aid in to begin with, which is that's not totally what we should debate upon, right? It is absolutely, that's not question, and it's already been elaborated by my first speaker, right? It is in the interest of everyone, because every country that is present in the global today, that is present in the globe, that is present in the earth, has signed the Paris Agreement. 194 countries have signed the Paris Agreement, which is they are willing. It is in their national agenda, but it's not. It's different priorities, right? But it is in their national agenda to do the and to build their environmentally policies, right? To begin with, right? So it's not supposed to be the debate. That's not supposed to be the classes. Not supposed to be the debate on what should be happening in the in today's evening, yeah, right, madam, ladies and gentlemen. And to the third mistake that is coming from the opposite side of the house, they also fail, so they cannot elaborate on the impact on what their argument are actually, giving on. Like for example, the government side of the house were able to manage to elaborate to you why this kind of aid is important for these developing countries. We already answered to why, and now we're answering the how is the impact, right? And we already give to you, we at least elaborate for stakeholders like this aid could, influence another countries, another developing countries to do more, to do the same, to catch up with them. And it also influences society. It doesn't end there. It also influences the NGO, for example, communities, society in that region, right? To push the agenda to the government to ensure that the environmental policy will keep on sounding and will keep on standing, right? So those clashes, those other classes is the impact, and I believe that the point should be given to the government side of the house, right? Where we did not fail to elaborate to you on why is the impact in the end of the day is much more impactful, is what we bring the most stakeholders, we bring the most analysis, whereas they only give a very like examples of Malaysia, Indonesia, threat of air or characterizations, right? And then finally, they did not give, this is the most crucial part, they did not give an alternative parameters. They did not even argue on what other ground that they could give this aid, like as a developed country could give this aid to the developing countries other than those developing countries that is implementing environmentally friendly policies, right? So to recap, the opposition side of the house does not have any more points standing up and does not have any proper foundations in the first place. That's why the win should go to the government side of the house. Thank you.
Right, that concludes the third speech from the government side. Now I'd like to call upon Ms. Anisia Orshian Hassan as the third speaker from the opposition side. Is all yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself. My name is Orchid, and I'm gonna be the third speaker of the opposition of the house. So, firstly, I'm gonna talk about how how governments arguments are somehow not valid to our own debate tonight. So we have to highlight the fact that this house as a developed country, So we're a developed country now, and by saying that, as a matter of fact, we're also struggling by managing our own country, right? By managing our own economy. So that is why we need to be careful for whatever expenses that comes out from our own country, right? So, secondly, clarifying about the investment that the house is trying to give. So basically, if we're as a developed country, if we're risking our own money, our own resources to help another developing countries, that is potentially not benefit us in the future. It would be a really risky. It is a challenge by ourselves to build our own environmentally friendly policies, right? And third, we have to give highlight about that we would only give to the developing countries that implement environmentally friendly policies. That being said, we cannot really give aid to another country that could benefit us, right? So by saying that, we would like to
Excuse
bring
me, madam, POI.
all right, accepted.
Isn't it your duty as a privileged country that is far more well off to give aid to countries that are struggling? Isn't that inhumane? Thank you.
All right, answering that question, do you not get it that we as a developed country are helping another developing country, right? So here's the logic, right? Let me get back to my third point is that we would only give aid to only developing country. Isn't that selfish? Isn't it selfish to think for our own people as a developed country? That is for that is for the first argument. Secondly, it is about open opportunity. So the first, second, and also second speaker, I believe they were talking about how we could bid, how a good economy or a stable economy would help us to expand to another sectors, right? For example, like medical and also educational, right? Without having money in the first place, we cannot afford that. And also by saying that, where we don't have money in the very first place, we cannot really afford environmentally policies. Why is that so? Because it is very expensive. It is very expensive in the very first place. Another thing. Another thing that we should talk about in the debate is that countries that implement environmentally country means that they can manage to afford their economy. So the one that you should aid is not only the country that implements it, but developing country who needs aids, right? So let's say so it is more selfish that we are actually picking on the one that let's say they're implementing environmentally policies, right? So we should give aid to them, but in a matter of fact, environmentally friendly policies are very could be counterproductive to their own GDP, right? So that cannot bring them profit in the next day. Next, yeah, we cannot forget for a fact that as a developing countries, it is very important for us to make our own economy better first. That being said, if we prioritize about having environmentally friendly policies, it could be counterproductive, right? So we don't want the whole nation to go down, the economy go down, because it could affect another thing. The third speaker were asking about how is the impact, how could the impact be, how would be the impact, and these are the impact that I was talking that we were talking about. We cannot move to another sector until we are settled and in our own economy first. That is why that is what we're trying to elaborate here. Yeah, and also if you're saying if we only give aid to environment friendly country, then the other country who needs to develop environmentally friendly policies that is expensive, that is not affordable at the very first place. So it is more selfish, right? So coming back to our own main points, we would like to actually remind the House that environmentally friendly is not the only parameter for us to give aid to another developing country as also a developing country. And also we have to be skeptical for these for these environmentally friendly policies, because in reality, in our own world, in our true world, policies can be very skeptical, because they are built to benefit only a few people in the country, right? So we have to be skeptical. And then secondly, and then the next thing that we have to worry about is that they can manage the money that we are giving them. For example, they have no corruption. And then I believe the third speaker has mentioned that every country has their own interest. And also, if we're prioritizing about developing countries, I think we think that it is not right to begin with. So thank you.
Right, that concludes the first, second, and third speakers of both government and opposition side. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Nathaniel Isaiah as the reply speaker from the opposition side. Time is all yours.
All right, good evening, everyone. I am Nathaniel Isaiah as the reply speaker from the side of the opposition. So I would like to conclude the arguments that the opposition has made by first reiterating the arguments that we have made. First of all, we believe that giving aid only to developing countries that implement environmentally friendly policies is not a good parameter. And the second argument that we are bringing is that we shouldn't only give aid to environmentally friendly policy implementing countries, but also other developing countries that can give us benefit. And the third argument that the third speaker has also said is that as a developed country, we are talking as a developed country. That's why we also need to consider the many things that comes with giving aid to another developing country. And we believe that giving aid on the basis that environmental policy is the only thing that we should consider, it is a very hard thing to do as a parameter. As the second and third speaker has also said, it's that environmentally friendly policies are very, very hard to implement. And it has been proven to also take a lot of money and economy in their economy, which is why we can see in our current status quo, not every country can implement these very environmentally friendly policies. And that is why we believe that making environmentally friendly policy country as the basis to give aid is not a very good thing. And then we'd also like to argue about the government saying that giving aid, not only giving aid to environmentally friendly policy implementing countries are inhumane or selfish, when we can argue that the fact that we are wise in our consideration on what to give and what parameter to use to give aid is actually very beneficial also for our own country, which factually we need to develop too. And we can also argue that only giving aid to environmentally friendly policy implementing countries is also kind of selfish, because we are also not giving aid to countries that might actually need it more than environmentally friendly policy countries. So yeah, there is just a bit of a comparison right there about your argument about it being very selfish and inhumane. And finally, the argument is that it is very hard to prove about these environmentally friendly policies implementing countries, because like the third speaker said, we cannot, there is no surefire mechanism to prove that they have implemented these methods, and the government has also failed to prove these methods about how to ensure that these countries that we give aid implement environmentally friendly policies, not just as a front, but also as their spirit. And the third speaker also, I believe, also said that it might not be their priority. So if it's not their priority, how can we be sure that the aid we are giving is to a country, a developing country that implements environmentally friendly policies? So yeah, that is, I believe that is very hard to prove. And finally, to conclude our arguments, we'd like to say that it is not that we shouldn't give aid to countries which might also implement environmentally friendly policies, but to reconsider the basis and parameters that we use to give aid to these countries. And that is why we believe that the Department for Civil and Environmental Engineering should win this debate. Thank you.
Right, that concludes the reply speaker from the opposition side. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Christopher Erwin as the government speaker. Yeah, please proceed.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just to confirm, this is a reply speech for 4 minutes. And no PI. Very well. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. First of all, dear Judge Ensa, thank you so much for paying attention to this debate. I would like to review it for you now as a reply speaker. And before I begin, remember that any new matter that was brought in a reply speech should not be counted. Now, I would like to outline 3 clashes in this debate that we as government has won. We have explained very well the motivation for giving development aid on this basis of environmental. We've tackled the capability of and feasibility of enabling such a policy, and we gave better characterization on the harms and benefits. So first of all, we believe that unfortunately opposition has absolutely not fulfilled their role or contribution and lacked severely in understanding in the debate. And I will elaborate in my first point of the clash in motivation. We gave a proper parameter, that is, the developed countries, UK, Germany, France, etc., through governmental institutions and agencies, give developmental aid. And this is already being given anyways by NGOs, the UN, the World Bank, and the French Agency of Development, etc. What this debate is about is whether we should give development aid to these developing countries on the basis of environmental policy or not. We believe we got the essence of the debate better, and therefore our team gave a better contribution. Second of all, we gave a better characterization on the stakeholders and the people involved within this motion. We explained the motivations of global and local stakeholders, NGOs, international agreements such as the Paris Agreement, and ratifications such as those, and interests and investors. Meanwhile, opposition did not give any parameter or model. Not once in this debate have they explained an alternate mechanism and elaborated it fully. Therefore, they have nothing to base upon this clash. And finally, we also gave an extra principle justification that we give aid for the kindness of the most vulnerable actors right now who are suffering the most from environmental damage, dying, choking and starving in pollution and famine. And that is why our side has a more humane approach. Meanwhile, opposition is selfish as privileged countries and they're well off, but not giving aid simply because it doesn't have economic profit. Therefore, we also win on the point of principle justification. On to the next clash, the second clash of feasibility and capability. Opposition often questioned that no, developing countries are incapable of enacting environmental policies. We have already tackled this point throughout the debate. First, we talked on how our mechanism shifts the mindsets of developing countries through funding towards policies that are more environmentally friendly. We showed you how, second of all, there is already motivation from local startups and local communities wanting to enact policies that are environmentally friendly, but cannot do so because of the corporate that is dominating their country. And that is why we have already taken down their questioning of feasibility and capability. And because they don't have a model, there's no capability to question their side. And finally, harms and benefits. We outlined the impacts and we gave a more nuanced image of this debate. We gave the harms of pollutions in Nigeria, and we give the benefits of innovation and sustainable infrastructure and educating the fields, advancing technical know-how and professions. Meanwhile, opposition is only concerned with selfish economic interests, no contribution and absolute lack of understanding in this debate. So please vote for government. We are POG.
All right, that concludes the end of our second round of debate. I'd like to thank you all, the speakers, for your involvement in this debate, as well as the adjudicator for your time and complete observation throughout today's debate. Since this is a silent round, I would like to invite all speakers to return to the main room for further instructions as well as announcements. Thank you very much.